What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dancers or Athletes Do podcast, where we discuss the athletic aspects of dancing. I'm your host, Slim B. In this episode, we have as guest Leah Slavens Haggard. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great. I'm really happy to welcome you on the show. For the people who don't know you, can you maybe quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, my name is Leah. I am a professional ballet dancer and I'm a certified nutrition health coach, and I am working towards my master's degree in human nutrition.
Great. You're both like a dancer and nutrition health coach.
Yeah.
At what point in your career did you start looking into nutrition?
I've always been interested in food. It's always been a passion of mine to make food and obviously eat food. And when I had several major injuries, I was in my late teens, early 20s. I really started experimenting with what foods were helping me during recovery. I was also exploring my relationship with food. So, in terms of how I related to it in terms of guilt and more of the mental and psychological aspect of food, as well as the physicality of food. And then from there, I started actually getting certification and education to be able to share it with other dancers, and especially teaching young students, as well as teachers and directors and parents about how to foster healthy nutrition with their young dancers so that they can grow up having a positive relationship with food and with their body.
Yeah, and you already mentioned something like injuries, for example, but maybe let's take a step back first. Like, what changes have you seen in your overall dancing because of the nutrition that you now take into account?
Absolutely. I have noticed an increased amount of stamina. I have undergone so many fewer injuries. So, right about the time when I was first starting to look into nutrition, I realized now that I wasn't eating enough and I wasn't eating specifically certain macronutrients as much as I should have been. And how that has changed for me, having a more well-rounded, balanced way of eating is I am sick much less often. I am
Mhm.
injured so much less often. My injuries tend to be a lot less severe. Recovery wise, I recover so much better. I have more energy. My mental capacity is better. Um, I feel like my attitude is better in general as well. So, all of those things.
Yeah, so almost everything
Yeah.
is better. You mentioned something like, for example, that you didn't met the required macros. Is
Mhm.
it one of the most difficult thing to accept, or what maybe overall is the difficult or the most difficult thing to accept once you learn more about nutrition?
Yeah. So, a lot of nutrition advice that we see on the forefront of social media and what we find in kind of like generic magazines, online blogs, and articles, a lot of them are geared towards weight loss. And as dancers, that's usually not what should be of concern. It should
Mhm.
be fueling your body, making sure that you maintain the energy requirements that you need to dance, making sure that you're injury free, maintaining muscle mass and growing muscle mass if needed. And so there's all these concerns that involve nutrition and your body when you're not eating enough. And I think that's something that a lot of dancers fall into because there's a lot of advice online about calorie amounts that are way under the amount of what a dancer or any active person should be eating, as well as there are a lot of fad diets out there that promote not eating certain macronutrients like carbohydrates or fat. If you think of like the 90s, the low fat craze, and now we're kind of in this high fat, low carb craze, which again, it's hard to say like that could work for some people, but in general, usually a balanced way of eating is for the long term what is best for your body.
Yeah, yeah. So making the difference between a diet for weight loss and a diet for actual active performance, as
Yeah.
it with dancing. Yeah, you mentioned that like on the forefront of magazines that you see like maybe a twisted vision sometimes of what a diet should be. How was this approached in the ballet world? Do you get like
Mhm.
classes about nutrition, or is it your own that you're depending on? when you want to learn more?
Yeah, so I tend to receive a lot of my information from not only what I'm learning, but I look at a lot of other nutritionists and dietitians who work with athletes. A lot of the recommended like calorie amount that is generalized is usually too low for a dancer or any sort of athlete. And I think with especially female dancers and especially female ballet dancers, we get this idea that we need to maintain a certain size, and that size is usually unattainable in a healthy way. And so I try and teach dancers the positive sides of being in the correct body shape and size for their age and for their
Mhm.
body and for them as an athlete, because it's especially important to, especially for women, not only in terms of injury prevention and longevity of career, but things such as their hormonal and menstrual health is super important. Mental health is really important and can be
Mhm.
affected by a lack of nutrition. So I get a lot of information from, scientific journals and articles, my education, as well as there's a lot of great registered dietitians and nutritionists who focus on caring for athletes and who also approach nutrition from a more intuitive eating aspect, which is what I personally have found has been super helpful for me to not only approach eating in a balanced way, but also be able to mentally kind of have this better relationship with food. So I'm not
Yeah.
approaching food in terms of rules or going on a diet or becoming really obsessed with the components of food, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you said that certain companies or in the ballet world are looking for a specific size when it comes to a dancer. What should they change in that regard to
Mhm.
actually attract people or guide people to having a healthy diet and not being too focused on the small number that they should attain?
So there's often this belief that dancers have to be a certain size, and we all have to conform to this size and body shape in order to be successful. And over the past, I would say, decade especially, there's been a lot of dancers, especially that I can think of in America, who are female ballet dancers who are kind of defying those odds in terms of their body size and shape and showing
Mm.
that they you don't have to be stick thin, not have any curves, um, in order to be strong, successful, beautiful,
Hmm.
artistic on stage. And I think that should be the goal is artistry and character and technique on stage instead of the size of the tutu, the size of the body that you see on stage. What I have noticed when watching dancers of all sizes on stage, they look more similar than they do when you see them in like a classroom setting. Like their
Hmm.
bodies look more of the same. And anyone who is dancing 40 hours a week, or 30 hours a week, or whatever it may be, you're most likely going to be in very good shape. And so I would say, for the most part, dancers do not need to worry about their size. It's more important to focus on
Yeah.
their like actual artistry and how their body is functioning. Because if they're trying to become so small and not eating enough calories or enough of certain macronutrients, their body isn't going to be able to perform as an athlete and as a dancer like it should.
Hmm.
And then that will trickle down into other body aspects in terms of injuries, in terms of, like muscle mass getting lost, in terms of health in other areas, bone health, menstrual health for women, you name it. So it's really important, I think, for companies to focus on the actual health of their dancers rather than the size. And one thing that I am grateful for is I'm starting to see this shift as younger directors and teachers are starting to crop up from a younger or more previous generation of dancers who have started to have this different idea of what it means to actually be a dancer in terms of the physicality of it.
Yeah, so their own experience allows them to understand that it's not just about the size that you bring to the stage, but you're actually actual dancing.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
great. Now I want to actually go to one of the other things that you do, or that's part of what you do, is that you have your own YouTube channel.
Yes.
So I'll add this plug for you. In some of the YouTube videos, you talk about intuitive eating. You kind of meant something a little bit earlier too. Can you maybe explain what that exactly is?
So, intuitive eating is a way of thinking about food and approaching food that was developed by two registered dietitians, Elise Reich and Emily Treble. I think it was in the 80s or 90s, and it was to help or find a different approach to eating that wasn't just about dieting and having this really strict and kind of this forced what would you call it, like this forced obsession with food, and feeling like you have to control everything about what you eat. And they kind of looked at that not only in terms of how that was affecting the nutrition of their clients, but also the mentality of their clients. So, intuitive eating, it deals, yes, with, they talk about basic nutritional information that is great for everyone, but then they also talk about listening to things such as your hunger cues. So, making sure that you're honoring when your body is hungry and what that looks like for each person. They also have a hunger and fullness scale. So, it allows you to kind of take a peek into whether before, during, or after a meal, how hungry or how full am I? And that kind of be the gauge of, do I need to eat more? Am I overly stuffed? So what is that telling my body? So it's kind of setting the groundwork for really seeing how foods and different types of foods and amounts of foods are influencing your body and how your body feels based on that. So, how I translate that to dancers is I really help them focus on, okay, so you find that you just had coffee this morning and you're in the middle of ballet class and all of a sudden your energy is crashing and you're starving. Okay, what does that tell you? Well, you didn't have any food this morning. Even though you might not feel hungry in the morning, try and eat a little bit of something and see how that affects your performance in class. And then they might notice, like, oh, I had more energy. And I realized that when I just drink coffee, that's stifling my hunger cues and my body's ability to tell me that it needs food. And so it's basically just pushing those hunger cues out, and they become more intense later on down the road. And so it's this constant feedback cycle that I think is really important for dancers, because we're people who are so in tune with our bodies. And so our nutrition should be as well. And also, something that's really important about intuitive eating is recognizing that every single body is different. And so, what we need from food is going to be different from someone else. So, there's not one right way of eating or a wrong way of eating that is going to blanket apply to everyone. We all
Yeah.
have we're different ages, we're, male, female, or, you know, whatever gender someone subscribes to. We have different muscle mass, we have different stress levels, activity levels, nutritional preferences. There might be some sort of intolerance to certain foods or an allergy to food that needs to be taken into consideration. So it's a really individualized approach to nutrition, which I think is really important.
Yeah, great. You already mentioned something like people might just drink coffee before they go to training. Probably a big excuse will be that they don't have the time to
Hmm.
to to eat properly. If I remember correctly, you also did like a video about meal prepping where you give an example of the things that you prepped.
Hmm.
It sounds like a big savior. What exactly does it include, meal prepping, and how does it work?
Yep, absolutely. So, um, meal prepping is whether it's prepping whole meals or different components of meals that can
Hmm.
make making meals later on a lot easier. So for me, I don't necessarily make, or I mean, I do half and half. So sometimes I'll make, like, let's say a certain type of soup or a pasta or something ahead of time that can be used for different meals. Or I like to to make certain components of food. So I'll
Hmm.
make like a big batch of quinoa or roasted vegetables. I'll make some sort of protein ahead of time so that I can combine it in different ways so that it makes my meals a little bit more interesting rather than
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
eating the same thing, 6 nights in a row. And that way it can also kind of play into intuitive eating. If I feel like something that is, more hearty, I can add some more nuts or seeds or avocado. Or if I'm feeling something a little bit more light, I can, throw some of those things on top of some greens and have more of it kind of like a salad. So that has been super important, not in just in terms of like serving my intuitive eating side of me and, finding that balance between nutrition and acknowledging what my body needs. But also it just saves on time.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
as dancers, we're busy, we're on our feet all day, we're exhausted. The last thing that we really want to do when we get home is like cook for an hour after
Hmm.
dance. And so that has been a key component in being able to make sure that we're fueling our body, to make sure that we're getting enough nutrition and that we know what we're putting into our food. I'm someone who goes out to eat, occasionally, but I find that I feel better when I mostly eat the foods that I make. Personally, that's just how I
Yeah.
feel my best. And especially, this is important for dancers who are gone all day at the studio, making
Hmm.
sure that you're packing enough food and packing food that digests well in your stomach. So if in between a 5-minute break, you have time to eat something that is going to make sure that your energy stays up and that you're not going to all of a sudden get really intense hunger cues during the middle of rehearsal. But it also, makes sure that you're still getting in enough nutrition during the day. And so one way to do that is just to experiment with what makes my body feel really great and gives me enough energy throughout the day, and
Yeah.
what is something that's easy to pack, making sure that you have a secret stash of food. Like I was the dancer who always had snacks in my locker, just if I ever got hungry, and or if one of my colleagues ever got hungry, they know that they could go to my locker and take something from my stash. And it's also important, like, because our hunger levels will change from day to day. And we like to be able to plan out everything, but sometimes what you bring might not be enough for you to, feel satisfied, throughout the
Hmm.
whole day. And then lastly, talking about breakfast, it's super important for dancers. There are some dancers who say that they don't like to eat in the morning. And I understand that there might be some dancers who feel that way and might go into classes and rehearsals without any sort of nutrients. But I would encourage those dancers to see if there's anything that's inhibiting their hunger in terms of coffee or other sort of caffeine,
Hmm.
or if they're eating like really late at night and if that's affecting their hunger, as well as when they do start eating, how is their body feeling? Like, are they super ravenous? Are they feeling shaky? Are they spacey? Do they feel kind of mentally foggy? How are their energy levels? So there's a lot of, again, kind of like with intuitive eating, there's a lot of feedback mechanisms that we can use to then prepare our food ahead of time so that we can kind of predict what our body wants and needs during certain times of the day.
Yeah, great. As a nutrition coach, do you mostly focus on ballet dancers or do you also have dancers of other styles that you work with?
I mostly work with ballet dancers just because that's the world that I'm in. But
Yeah.
I mean, I work with any sort of dancer or athlete. I've even worked with non-dancers
Hmm.
and like non-athletes in general. I personally like I found my passion with working with dancers because I saw the need for dancers to have a nutrition resource that also understood their unique struggles
Yeah, yeah.
and can understand what they're going through because I have been through it myself. So I mostly work with ballet dancers just because that's who I know, but I would work with anyone.
Yeah. You also mentioned that you work with athletes that are non-dancers. Do
Mhm.
you see big differences or similarities there when it comes to the nutrition or the coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've seen several clients who are a little bit older and more like weekend warrior athletes started noticing, especially more stable energy levels throughout the day to be
Hmm.
able to have the motivation and energy to be able to work out more and like more efficiently and effectively, which I think that's all what every human being wants is to be able to take care of their
Yeah,
body
yeah.
and have the capacity to be able to not only feed ourselves well but also use our body in a positive and productive
Hmm.
way through exercise. And so that has been really cool to see. And just in general, this shift from thinking about food in terms of rules or good or bad, and
Hmm.
seeing food more as fuel and as something that can be balanced and can be enjoyed as well.
For dancers who want to get into nutrition or want to learn more, what would be their first step to do if they want to get started with it?
Absolutely. So there are so many great nutritional like professionals that are on social media, on YouTube, who are registered dietitians, nutritionists, or health coaches. Those are all people who have had nutrition training of varying degrees. And so I would encourage to seek out information from people who have, a nutrition background and
Hmm.
education,
Hmm.
and really, especially in terms of learning about it and implementing nutrition into your own life, it can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
oftentimes it feels like I need to change all these things at once. And that's really
Hmm.
overwhelming. And for a lot of people, when we try and change everything all at once, we end up kind of going really strong for a week and then just kind of falling off the bandwagon.
Mm.
And so I encourage a lot of people to just take it a step at a time. And whether it be you start with changing one thing about like if you notice that you are hungry in between lunch and dinner, and like by the time that you get to dinner, you're ravenous and you're hangry and you end up overeating during dinner to where you're uncomfortably stuffed because you're just so hungry that you're not able to really listen to your hunger cues and actually enjoy your dinner. Okay, maybe try implementing a snack when you start feeling hungry around like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and seeing how you feel. So it's implementing just those small little changes that over time can build up into a different approach to nutrition.
Yeah. I also saw in one of your videos that you are vegan. I don't know if you're
Yes.
still vegan. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
That you're vegan. Could you give some or shed some lights on your experiences there?
Absolutely. So it's something that I am not, it's not like I don't talk about to people, but it's something that I don't put at the forefront because I don't
Yeah.
want people to think that they also have to be vegan in
Hmm.
order to be healthy. For me, it just so happens that being plant-based is intuitive eating for me because I personally don't crave or like animal products. I My taste has changed to where I prefer like plant-based options, and
Hmm.
when I have had any sort of meat or dairy or eggs, I don't really feel as great after. But again, I'm not going to box myself in and say that I'm always going to eat this way forever. But I became vegan when I was injured. So this was kind of when I started learning more about nutrition from a more scientific standpoint for my body, and found a lot of information about veganism. And I was the last person to ever think that I would try going vegan, but it was kind of
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not doing anything else. I'm injured. So why not? I
Hmm.
just try it. And it helped not only just reinvigorate like my love for food and for especially like learning about how to prepare different types of foods and different vegetables and learning about so many other foods that I had never cooked or used or tried. So it really reinvigorated me to fuel my body. And it because I didn't feel kind of crappy after I was eating those foods,
Yeah.
I developed a healthier relationship with food and with my body. And I absolutely love the way that I eat. And to me, it has allowed me to have the balance between having whole foods as well as, throwing in some processed foods when I want here and there. So it's been a very sustainable and nutritious way for me personally to eat.
What is your favorite food then? I mean, okay, vegan, it's a little bit, I mean, you have, some say
Yeah,
less options, but it depends on how you look at it.
exactly.
Like when you train and when you don't train, what would be like your favorite go-to food on those two types of days?
Oh man, this is so difficult because I can think of so many. I feel like a go-to that I always do is some sort of like nourish bowl. That is kind of like the basis of it's so interchangeable because I feel like my taste I get bored really easily. And so my taste change with the seasons or just with I might really be into one type of food, for a few months, but like a nourish bowl that has like, let's say quinoa and because I love quinoa, it's super high in protein and has some fiber in there, some carbohydrates in there. And so it's a really great ingredient to use. And
Mhm.
then I love topping it with, I love tempeh, which is a fermented type of soy. I also love like hummus and garbanzo beans. So putting some sort of protein on there. I love having greens every single day because I really love just like the taste of greens as well as like how they make me feel. So adding some sort of green component. I love having roasted veggies on there because it gives some more like umph to it, I guess. So like
Yeah,
roasting some sweet potatoes or carrots are great on there.
great.
And then I love putting some other random things on there, whether it be some like spring onions, some sort of like sauce. Like I absolutely love tahini is like my obsession. So that's like a sesame seed butter basically and putting some sort of drizzle of a citrus, like a lemon or lime with some sort of herb. So that's kind of like my go-to because it combines all of the macronutrients in one and it's something that's really satisfying to me as well as I know it's going to fuel my body and just kind of support me in all the best ways. And then my favorite treat food. Well, I don't even know. Don't want to call it treat food. It's like my fun food. I love chocolate. So anything chocolate.
Mhm.
And um I love just like really good dark chocolate. It's something that I have every single day in the afternoon with my cup of tea and it makes my life.
People will definitely ask for the bowl recipe if I hear you talking.
Yes.
And it's like, oh,
Yes.
this and this and this. Okay, super nice. For you personally, what are the next steps as a dancer, as a coach? I mean, you're also continuing your education.
Mhm. Yeah, so I am continuing my education to get my master's in human nutrition. And from
Mm,
there, I will undergo a process where I have about 1,000 hours of practicum. So that's like supervised hours of working with clients
yeah,
and patients. And from there, I can sit on an exam to become a certified nutrition specialist. So that is like my long term, like 3 years out goal is to hopefully be able to get that certification. And that really puts me on this level where I'm able to work with dancers with more, I guess, like scientific nuance in terms of being able
mhm,
to order lab work, being able to work with nutritional deficiencies, working with eating disorders, because like that's where my real passion is like working with those areas. So that's like my long-term goal. And in terms of dancing, I'm a freelance dancer, which
Yeah.
has allowed me to have all this flexibility in my life. And I'm really grateful that there are a few companies that I, freelance for. So I'm able to travel around and, do Nutcracker with them or do another program with them. And it
Hmm.
allows me to still have that super important part of my life
Yeah. Yeah.
with me while also having balance outside of it by being able to pursue my education and my career and do things like my YouTube channel. I also have like a blog, a
Hmm.
newsletter. I'm hopefully going to be working on courses soon.
Oh, nice.
This is like if I get to it, I hope that's like my long-term goal is to be able to do that. And I mean, like way down the road, I want to be able to talk more with larger dance companies and ballet companies about how to serve their dancers the best and create wellness programs for their dancers
Hmm.
that really focus on their ultimate health and nutrition on the, forefront. That's my long-term goal.
It all sounds super exciting. So yeah, good luck with that. That's the first thing that
Thank
I'll
you.
say. Before we say goodbye, how can people get in touch with you? You also already mentioned your YouTube channel, blog. So can you maybe give some specifics that what the easiest way is to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I am on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube under What Fuels a Dancer. And
Hmm.
my website, you can either find it through whatfuelsadancer.com or lifefuelholisticwellness.com. Both will direct you to my website. From
Hmm.
there, my email is on there. Feel free to reach out to me, whether through email, through social media, through YouTube. However, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I absolutely love having any sort of conversation.
Yeah, great. Leah, I want to thank you a lot for coming on the show. It was super interesting, a lot of useful information for everybody, dancers, non-dancers, and so forth. I wish you all the best with everything, dancing, coaching, and your education. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here.
Bye bye.
Bye.
If you want to know more about podcast, you can find us on social media. We are at DAAT Podcast. DAAT stands for Dancers or Athletes Too. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also check out our website at daatpodcast.com. I'm also on social media. Surprise, surprise. You can find me at This Is Slim B. Thanks for listening, and I hope you tune in again for our next episode. Take care. Kobo out.